Take us away, leave the city behind. We're on our way to find the sky.
Hey everyone, welcome to Trail Sage, and this week we're talking about running on technical terrain, and more specifically about running on rocks. But before we get started, please know I'm not a professional, and all the advice and the suggestions that I give are based on my personal experiences. So if you're looking to improve your speed and confidence in a competitive environment, or you just want to become better at tackling technical terrain, then I hope some of these tips and tricks will help. I've broken down my approach into 3 steps: prepare, analyze, and execute. So let's start with preparation. Make sure you have the correct footwear before attempting any aggressive trail running. Trail shoes are designed specifically to take on rugged terrain and usually have deeper lugs and might even come with a rock plate. Now personally, my shoes don't have a rock plate in it, but as you can see, there's lots of foam here to offer me plenty of protection. If you're lucky enough to find footage of the trails, then review it. If I'm going to a place for the first time, I always search YouTube for videos of that specific area. Sites and apps like AllTrails are also extremely helpful and usually offer pretty good trail detail as well as photos. If you have weak ankles like me, then make sure you take the proper precautions to stabilize the joint. This may be with a brace or even with athletic tape. And finally, make sure that you're ready mentally as well as physically. If you're in the middle of a race or a run, take note of your fatigue level. I find that most of my injuries occur when I'm exhausted or when my mind's not in the right place. So, having said that, you have the right gear, you're physically fit, and you're mentally focused. Let's move on to the second part, and that's analyzing the terrain. This can happen a couple different ways, either on the fly or by stopping and assessing the situation. If a section is super technical and you have time to stop and look at it first, do it. This is by far the best and safest way to tackle a tough section. Take note of any problem areas and identify any good foot placements and handholds. Then draw a line from the start to finish and imagine yourself doing it. You may want to session a line a couple times to get it perfect, or at least take a mental note for the next time that you come across it. If you're in a race scenario or you're moving at a pretty good clip and you don't have time to stop, well then your decision making has to be extra quick. Understand the terrain and conditions that you're running on or in. And as you're running, ask yourself, are the shoes giving you plenty of grip? Are the trails dry? Are there lots of muddy sections? In addition to terrain, it's also important to analyze your own fatigue level. Is your head in the game? What's your confidence level like? Well, assuming you've done your homework and it all checks out, it's time to implement the rule of thirds. Basically, you want to divide the area in front of you into 3 parts. This is a technique that I use in mountain biking all the time, and it's extremely helpful in trail running as well. The first thing to do is to get an overall view of the terrain in front of you. Then shift your focus midway, and then finally to the area right in front or below your feet. As the terrain gets trickier, your natural tendency will be to look right down at your feet, but try not to do this, and instead continue to switch back and forth between the thirds. Foot placement is paramount, and keeping your head up will help you make better decisions and save you from getting into trouble. I mean, think about it. You wouldn't walk down the street with your head down the entire time, would you? You'd end up walking into a pole or missing your turn. Well, in trail running, there are a lot more obstacles and they're coming at you a lot quicker. Well, now you might be asking, so where do I look and how often do I check? How far you look ahead and how often you do it will be governed by your speed, the terrain, and your physical ability. The less technical the terrain, the faster you can move and the less time that you'll be spending looking at your feet. As the terrain gets more difficult, you'll want to slow your speed and concentrate more of your time on that first and second third. A misplaced foot could mean the end of your run, but not being ready for the next step could mean getting stuck or worse, having to backtrack. Pay attention to any mud prior to entering a rocky section. Having mud clog up your tread could spell disaster. If you do get mud stuck in your tread, then try and stomp out your feet as you run. So that brings me to my final step, and that's execution. This is going to take practice and time, but here are a few keys to think about. The first is to stay loose. One of the things that I love about trail running is there's no wrong way to do it. It's not like road running where you have to focus heavily on your form and stride, but instead, for me at least, the trail dictates how I move my body. Much like how a cat uses its tail to balance its movements, we can use our arms to counterbalance our actions. This will come instinctively and it should feel natural. For instance, do you remember balancing on a log or on top of a wall when you were a kid? You didn't have to tell yourself to use your hands to balance, you just did it. Well, it's kind of like that. And while we're talking about hands, your hands should always be at the ready. By this, I mean try and anticipate areas that you could slip and fall, and always be prepared to protect your head. Use your surroundings to your advantage. If there's a tree that you can grab, go for it. Remember, there's no wrong way to do this, and it's not like you're cheating if you have to hold onto a branch or use your butt to slide down a rock face. In terms of your feet, it's kind of like a moving puzzle, right? I mean, you want to find spots that give you the most amount of traction, but cause you the least amount of contortion. This means constantly adjusting your path and stride length to find optimal footing. You may also have to double up your steps in order to hit a certain takeoff point. For me, if I'm doing a large leap, I like to take off using my right foot. But having said that, you should also know your limits. Taking a big risk to shave off a second or two is not really worth a serious injury. Well, those are my 3 steps for running on technical terrain. Trail running for me is about getting outdoors and having fun. And nothing makes me feel more connected to the earth than getting my feet as well as my hands on it. The more involved the trail, the more engaged I feel. And that's what it's all about, right? The freedom, the fresh air, and that feeling that we could do anything. Well, I hope some of these tips will improve your confidence and speed, or at least get you out there trying something that maybe you've avoided in the past. Well, that does it for this week's video. I hope that was helpful to you, and if you feel like I missed anything or you want me to cover anything in more detail, let me know in the comments below. Well, if you liked the video and you want to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching.